Question for this week. Someone says, so a deep trigger of mine, a hot button, is when participants aren't listening to me. And I'd said something, and a few minutes later, they either ask the same question or somebody else says what I just said, then it's just so frustrating. And this was from a white woman. And so I really relate. Now, when I'm centered, I have a few strategies, and those are what I want to share. So if it's just the first time, if I change my thoughts from, they're not listening to me, this is sexist, why don't they pay attention to me, this happens all the time. So instead of spinning myself into a triggered state, the first time this happens, what I can do is change my thoughts. And so as soon as you hear yourself kind of going down that road of hot button, you can shift your thinking. And here's some thoughts that I actually used recently. It was, all right, breathe. People learn differently. Yes, I said it, but maybe they were having an aha in the moment and they weren't listening to me because they were so engrossed, kind of engaged in what they were thinking about. What if they're introverts, reflective learners, and my speed is pretty quick, and so they were thinking about what I said 30 seconds ago, missed what I had just said, and so asked a question later. Are those possible? They're all possible. Why I think it's important we change our thoughts is if I get irritated, then my energy is going to impact the group, impact learning. So again, the first or second time something happens, if I shift my thoughts, then I'll be better positioned to respond effectively. Lately, I've realized that people learn through repetition. And I used to think, oh, if I just say something, they'll get it. But when I think about me, I don't get things the first time. I like to read it, think about it, apply it. And so it was actually in a workshop the other day that someone helped me realize that expecting people to learn things quickly or the first time is white culture and dominant culture. Urgency, there's a right way. And that was really helpful to me because I was actually teaching something a second way another time and half apologizing that I was repeating something, and someone raised their hand. They were African British. That was how they named themselves. And they're like, in my culture, people were killed. So enslaved peoples were killed if they learned to read. And so for us to be able to teach, to be us to have safety, to talk about where escape plans were, we had to repeat things, and often did that in stories and song. And so you might notice gospel, they said, has a lot of repetition. So this was all kind of blowing my mind to realize that repeating things, having people have several chances to hear them in different ways, and not expecting people to learn something right away is really countercultural and liberating. So a couple of the ways you can change your thoughts. I mean, that story helps me be grounded. And then I realized, people learn from hearing something, viewing something, reading something, and then reflecting on it and then applying it to their lives. So again, if I'm expecting people to hear me, they're auditory learners, they might take it in, but they are kinesthetic. There are folks that learn by writing. There are folks that learn visually by doing. That's what kinesthetic, I think, means. So am I giving people enough chance and time to reflect, apply the knowledge, talk with each other, apply it to a case study? So it could be a reflection of my design and facilitation gaps for this particular audience. Because some folks had a little caffeine worked out and they might be able to catch things the first or second time, especially if it's not brand new information. But mostly what I'm trying to share here is when you trigger yourself because someone didn't follow a direction, didn't seem to hear you, they asked a second question, someone else said the same thing that happened to be a privileged group identity or marginalized, it may not be that dynamics of oppression are happening in the moment, or at least that may not be the forefront of what's happening. You can still be impacted, but if you change your thoughts, you might be able to stay present. And then the second or third time it happens, you can grounded and centered stay like I did the other day. So I'm noticing I'm having trouble getting you all to come back from activities. And I'm ringing the bell and I'm using the microphone and asking 2 or 3 times. So I'm just noticing that. I'm also noticing it seems different than when my male colleague facilitator asks you to come back from activities. Anybody notice that? Now, to be fair, I wish I was that clear. I was moderately high triggered by then because it'd probably been the fifth or sixth time. And I probably said something like, I'm noticing I'm having trouble bringing people back. I think it's a gender cut. I could be wrong, but I think it's a gender dynamic. Now, this was on day 2 of deep work around equity inclusion. So there wasn't any pushback. And after that, people seemed to pay more attention when I was trying to bring them back. Now, that's a different example than if I'm giving a piece of information. But for me, they're similar in that if it's the first or second time, I'll try to navigate my own feelings and thoughts. Third or fourth, I'll probably use panning, pay attention now as the skill to notice the dynamic, or ask the group, what are y'all noticing is happening in the moment? And then see what happens.